What's up everyone? So as you can see on your screen right now, I made a Phobies tier list. Now it's definitely not perfect. I think that there are a lot of things in this tier list and the way I made it that are definitely flawed. But I'd like to show you how I made it before you put down any comments or questions wondering why I put so many cards in bottom tier and why the tier list is made that way. It doesn't really make any sense. I'd like you to watch the video and to understand how I made it, because it's not really my opinion on the game. Definitely not. It would be a whole lot different, but I'm kind of new at the game anyway, so it wouldn't be really good for me to make a tier list that way. So there's this thing in Phobies, which is an MVP. MVP is the most valuable player in a game, or I guess you could call it most valuable Phobies. It would still be the same acronym. And essentially, at the end of any game in Phobies, you have a MVP. So it pretty much shows you which character in your game did the most amount of work. And you can also go, when you look at your own profile in Phobies, you're going to see that there are 3 MVPs that are going to be displayed. So these are going to be the Phobies that have gotten the most amount of times an MVP in your last 50 games, I think. So when I saw that, I had an idea. I was wondering if there could be a way to collect all that data of the best players in the game and which MVPs they have, or like which Phobies are their MVPs, so that you can sort of rank every Phobie in the game with how many times they are in the MVPs of the top, let's say, 100 players. So that's what I pretty much tried to do. Now, first thing I needed to make sure is that the MVP is a good indication of how valuable a card is in the game. I did some tests and I played against myself, and I tried a few things like in short games, and I was able to conclude. I'm gonna show maybe some footage of me trying some tests right now on the video, but I concluded that there are many factors that come into play here. Number one is how much damage you deal, as much to the heart as to opponents. When you do more damage, you're more likely to be an MVP. So if you take damage, it's the same thing. You're gonna be more likely to be an MVP. And I think it's by the same factor. I'm not quite sure. Maybe if you take 100 damage and one of your Phobies deals 200 damage, the Phobie that dealt damage is gonna be the MVP, and it's gonna be the opposite if the roles are switched. If no one does anything in the game, both Phobies are gonna be the Razor Mouth. For some reason, they just use Razor Mouth as like a default setting. And if, let's say for example, one of your Phobies uses an ultimate ability, it doesn't have to deal damage. That's gonna increase one of your Phobies' MVP score, the Phobie that, you know, use the ultimate ability, and that's gonna mean that they're gonna be the MVP. So we see that using an ultimate ability comes into play to determine which character is going to be an MVP. There's also the capture points. So if one of your Phobies captures panic points, they're going to be more likely to be an MVP. That's going to increase what I call their MVP score. So I think that's how it works. I'm not sure. I'm not like in the code of the game. I think these 5 points that I've talked about are the 5 points that are taken into account when measuring which character is an MVP, but it's possible that I'm missing some. The point is, I think the devs have made it so that it's a good indication which card is an MVP. It's a good indication of which character played the biggest role in the game. You know, if that character you use deals more damage, it's going to be important. If he receives damage, it means that it's tanking some, right? So it's also important. Now, it's flawed, okay? And it's definitely not perfect, because some characters have special abilities that don't necessarily mean dealing damage. For example, you have the healers, which of course they use the ultimate ability, which may increase their MVP score, but they're not going to contribute. They're just going to help other Phobies deal damage. So these other Phobies might become MVPs, but the healers, it's very unlikely. And this is what I sort of found through making this video. Now, I think I've talked enough about MVPs. Now we can argue if being an MVP is actually a good indication of a card being top tier in the game. To make this video, I sort of came in with the assumption that it was a good indication of how helpful a phobie is in a game. So if you pick a phobie and they turn out to do a good job, they're gonna become MVP. And if that happens enough, they're gonna become your MVP in your top 3 of the last 50 games. So I told myself, yeah, that's probably the case. And I decided, yeah, let's just do what I had in mind. Let's collect every single MVP in the top 100 async players in the world, the ones that have the highest elo or the highest score. These are gonna tend to be the best players in the world, right? So if I take the top 100, and I decided to go with async because the players had overall like a higher elo. This may not be how it works, but also I think async has been around for a longer time, and people play async more than they do arena. So that's why I went with async. It's going to be maybe a little bit a better sign, a better indication of which players are the best in the world. So I went with async. Top 100, I went with like a high sample size, but I didn't want to go like too far down because I mean, maybe in the top like 200, 300 players, you start to get players that are not as good and that don't have a great grasp on the meta, such as myself probably. I pretty much just put down a lot of data. As you can see on my screen right now, I went to Excel. I put down the rank of each player, their name, so you can see obviously the rank is going to change over time. And this is what actually happened. Like I did that on like 2 separate days, and around like the I stopped at 50. So this means that the players' ranks changed, and it messed up my order a little bit. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. I didn't miss any players. I also put down how many phobies they had and their stress level, which I thought was going to be used eventually to like measure some of the influence of rarer phobies being into MVPs. I'll explain later. And then I just went MVP 1, MVP 2, MVP 3. So like, obviously there's 3 MVPs. I don't know if the position actually matters, and I'd like to see some people, if you guys know that in the comments, please tell me. I couldn't really find if it was important or not. When I analyzed the data, I didn't take into account that MVP 1 was better than MVP 3 or the opposite. So also, as you can see, all these numbers here are attached to every phobie in the game. So like number 1 is Razormouth, and number 84 Zappy, and then I went to work. I just took a look at all the leaderboard, every MVP in the game, in the top 100, and that's what I got. Now that was a kind of a lot of work. It was probably like 2 hours of just taking down numbers after number after number, and eventually I was able to like remember pretty much like which numbers were attributed to each phobie. And essentially now I had the data, I went into analyzing it. I did that yesterday. It was honestly kind of fun because there's so many things that you can like sort of conclude from all that data, honestly. So first thing I did was MVP key bias, but it's probably better to talk about that later. I went MVP frequency for each phobie. So let's define what MVP frequency is. I use that term a lot, and it doesn't really have a definition in the dictionary. So what it means is it underlines how likely a player is to have a set phobie in their MVPs. I don't know, Venus is probably like 8 times, was probably like put down 8 times as an MVP in the top 100. This means that 8% of players have Venus as their MVP, because obviously you can't have the same MVP twice. So there's an 8% chance that a player in the top 100 has Venus as their MVP, and this is what MVP frequency is. So I took all that data, I counted how many times any of the numbers attributed to a character came out in all that data set, and as you can see, there's a lot of zeros, okay, especially in the small phobies, the 1 and 2 keys. We'll explain that later. But I came out with all that data, lots of zeros, lots of 1%, 2%. So at that point, I was a little bit like, I want to say disappointed, because it turned out that most players had the same MVPs like that came out again and again and again. And this is what I did afterwards. So I pretty much decided, I filtered all the MVP frequency from biggest to lowest, and you can see each phobie and all their MVP frequency. And now there was like, I don't know, like 40 phobies. So out of the 120, there was like 80 of them that did not even came out as an MVP in the top 100. Okay, so there's a lot of overlap. See, you'll see here, and I decided also to make it look a little bit better and more like understandable with a graph here. So I want to take a look at this graph. Hopefully it's big enough on the video so that you guys can like screenshot if you want and like remember it. Longest graph, MVP frequency in the top 100 async leaderboard for each non-0% phobie. So like all the 0% frequency I just took out because it was going to be like literally 1 meter long graph on my computer screen. It will not have fit. So you can see here the percentage of players who have each phobie here, and you can take a look if you want. You can pause the video if you're curious. So obviously each percentage score, like 1%, means that out of the top 100 players, there's only one of them that have each of these phobies. I don't really like the 1% and 2% results because it's very subjective. You know, one of the top 100 players could just say, I really like K9000, so I'm gonna play him a lot. Doesn't really mean that it's like a really good phobie. So like I think K9000 is Vladimir. His K9000 is like level 19 or something. This dude probably like plays him every single game. So does it mean that K9000 is great? Not necessarily. I mean, he could be bad and Vladimir could just have him at a high level and he just likes him. Doesn't mean that I necessarily think K9000 is bad. I just don't have him, so I can't really like have a good opinion on him, you know. Now, what is like I think really good data to have is all the top ones here. So like from Stabby to maybe, I don't know, maybe even Snowball or Miss Muffet. These phobies are very likely to be in your MVPs if you're in the top 100, and maybe if you're even not in the top 100, because some of these are like not ultra rares. So this is what I got. Does that mean that Stabby is very good? Probably. It probably does. Does it mean that all these 0% phobies that are not on here are bad? That's the problem. That's the big problem with this tier list. I think it's just like very bad at pointing out which characters are bad. Now with all the MVP frequency, we can even take a look at some of the key cost. I call it the MVP key bias. So pretty much what that means is, as you can see on the screen, out of all the 300 or so MVPs that have come up, and it's possible that I didn't do this like correctly. I think it summed up to like 292 or something. So I messed up a bit of my math here, but it's not that bad. You can also, like, if you want, just double check all that data here. I'll probably make it available somehow to you guys, maybe in the Discord or in the description of this video. We can see that there's only seven times have a 2 key cost phobie come up in the top 300 MVPs in async, right? That is very rare. That's 7 out of 300. It's like under 2.5%. And now that just skyrockets if it's a 3 key. 3 keys are much more likely to be in the top 300 MVP phobies. Now, big part of that is gonna be attributed to Stabby. Stabby is probably like, I don't know, 70% of all that, 77 results. The rest is like gonna be like Bowmangles and I don't even know which one. It's probably these two are gonna be like 95% of it. Then you have 4 key that goes down a little bit. 5 key goes down again. 6 key skyrockets once more. 75, okay? And out of that 75, most of that is probably going to be, as you can see here, erotic and klepto. these two make up a big percent, and we can even count 27 plus 29. That's gonna be 66 out of 75, so it's 90% of them. And then goes on again 7 key, goes on again 8 key, comes up a little bit for 9 keys. You can attribute that to luck, okay? But you'll see that every time it's a factor of 3, the likelihood of it being in the top 100 leaderboard in async for every blah 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 is higher, right? So like 3 key, higher, 6 key, higher, 9 key. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's low, but considering that most phobies, there's only like 4 9 keys, it's pretty high, you know? It's like it's a higher percentage. So I don't want to like make conclusions that are out of my expertise, but I think the reason for that is because since you get 3 keys every turn, it's very easy to pop out like a 3 cost phobie or a 6 cost phobie, because you either bank to, I think it happens often that you spend all your keys and then you bank to like 3, and if you don't spend 3, you bank to 6 key and then you spend 6 key. So like that's kind of what I do. Does it mean that the 5 keys and does it mean that the 4 and 5 keys and the 7 and 8 keys are worse? Not necessarily, but it means that you're gonna use them less often. So that's definitely interesting, man. That's definitely interesting. Right, now I did some reflection. I thought, okay, so it's definitely true that most players in the top 100 don't have all phobies. I mean, I think there's only one guy that has every phobie. Most of them are gonna have around, and we can even take a look at the when we look at the data. So I did an average here. On average, the people in the top 100 have 52 phobies, 53. So it's not a lot, okay? So from that, I started thinking, yeah, okay, it's definitely not perfect, because if most people don't have the phobies, some of the ultra rare phobies, some of the well, I mean, obviously they're gonna be less likely to not have the common, so they're probably not gonna have the ultra rare phobies. Some of the ultra rare phobies are gonna get left out of all that data here. So if everyone had every phobie in the game, it's very possible that some of the ultra rares, like, I don't know, probably some of the ultra rare phobies like Snowball or Evil 3.0, or I don't know, Smother Mother, Smiley. I don't know if Smiley is an ultra rare. I think so. I mean, pretty much every ultra rare here. It's very likely that they would be used more often, and that they would be more often in the top of the MVPs here, because you see Stabby, Ginston, Erratic, Klepto, Bowmangles, Hevo, Unbearable, and dude, Smiley is the first ultra rare that we see. It's not even an ultra rare, so the first ultra rare is Chuck. Okay, interesting. So I decided what way could I test maybe some of the results that we could get from a population that had every phobie. I decided to go with a population that had a higher amount of phobies on average. Now, I did want to have like a decent amount of people. If I decided to go with like everyone that had over 100 phobies, I would have had like 10 people, not even like 7. So I went with a larger population. I went with higher than 70. That does mean that the people down here are not gonna have a lot of phobies, right? And maybe I shouldn't have taken them, but I sort of wanted to balance having a large population with having lots of phobies. So I did the same thing I did earlier. I pretty much counted out of all that population how many, which phobies came out more often, and this is what I got here. So I went boom and boom. Did the same little graph. We see in number 1, it's still Stabby. Klepto is also here, but now we see Alastor and Chuck. Okay, Alastor and Chuck were in. If we take a look at the other graph here, where's Alastor? Alastor and Chuck are both 6%, 8%, and when we look at the population with more phobies, it jumps up to 18%, or not even 23% for both. So really, the rarity of a phobia plays a huge factor in the results that we have gotten here. This is the conclusion I got. Now, is this more accurate than this thing? It probably is, right? The problem is we don't really have the data of the 1, 2, 3, 4% because we only have like a population of 22 people. I also managed to do some other conclusion. I analyzed some of the like how often each phobia would come up, like depending on their rarity. So I went with the initial hypothesis that every phobia in the game is distributed equally in terms of how good they are, depending on their rarity. So on average, each ultra rare phobia is as good as each rare phobia compared to, you know, uncommon and common. If everyone had every phobia, it should be, you know, relatively equal in terms of the relation to how many phobias there are of each rarity. There's 33 common phobias, and there's 118, maybe it's 120. Because I thought there's 2 new phobias. Yeah, there's 2 new phobias that I didn't count in this. That's also kind of a problem. The data set that I took to analyze, you know, like the list of every phobia, it didn't count the 2 newest ones. So that sucks. It's not that big of a deal because they didn't come up in the leaderboard anyways. But whatever. There's 33 common phobias, 118 total. So it should be 28% of them. 28% of the MVPs should be common, you know. And the results I got were actually a little higher, right? And that's in the total population of 100, the top 100 players in async. Now that made sense. And the reason why is because people don't have ultra rare phobias, right? So you'd see the biggest difference here. There's 20% of phobias in the game which are ultra rare, and only 13% are in the top 100 MVP leaderboard, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so I did the same test with our smaller population of 22 people with more phobias, right? And this is the results I got here. So you'll see instead of 13% and 20% being the theoretical frequency, it's 29%. So 29% of the phobias in the 22 players that have the most amount of phobias, 29% of them are ultra rares. And the thing is, it's not even like perfect because a lot of people here don't have all the phobias, right? A lot of them have under 100 phobias. So and it's very likely that the vast majority of the phobias they don't have are ultra rare, right? So from that, we can conclude that from the smaller sample of the players who have unlocked more phobias, we can also see that they tend to have a higher MVP frequency in ultra rare phobias compared to common, uncommon, and rare. If the rarity of a phobia had no relation to its usefulness, we would expect this theoretical frequency here. But since the ultra rare frequency is higher, higher than the theoretical frequency, we could think that the ultra rare are actually slightly better cards, right? I think that makes sense. I think that's a fair point. Now, obviously, you guys are free to discuss it in the comments. I think these results here are very, very interesting. And also did something here. So from I can't write. Hold on. So from these two tables, we can notice the frequency of ultra rare MVPs increase more than twofold between the two populations, right? So 30%, 29%. Which leads to the conclusion that the frequency of ultra rare as MVPs increases as more phobias are accumulated. So if every player had every phobia, the distribution of MVP frequency would look a lot different. And if you guys want, you can compare these two graphs here. Okay, so this one, and you'll see that, as I pointed out before, Alastor, Chuck are much higher. So that, I mean, that just makes sense, right? And we can also see, I think Snowball is higher, Beauty is higher, Fire Ant, I think Fire Ant is like the same for some reason. It's very close. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of like the problem with having small populations, right? This is definitely not perfect. And finally, we come down to the tier lists I made. So now we're gonna go over some of the like we're gonna maybe do a bit of a summary of all that we did. So first thing, as we can see here, that's the MVP frequency here in the percentage in every tier. Stabby at the top. Stabby is the true king. I think he should be nerfed, honestly. I mean, we're gonna expect one card in the game to be better than others, or more reliable, more oftenly used. That's not a word. More often used, more. I don't know. Okay, whatever. So you can see all the results here. I think this representation is a little bit more simple to see than simple to understand than this freaking mess, long ass graph. So that's what we did. This one, by the way, is the same one, right? But from the smaller population of 22 people, okay? And we can see these ultra rare Phobies. I think Dowser's not ultra rare, but these two are ultra rare. Whatever. For some reason, like, this tier does not have any ultra rares in it, which is interesting. Okay, so now we go out of all these ones, okay? So we see that it's very likely that these ones, if they aren't very good Phobies, at least they're very consistent, okay? If 20% of the players or more have them, or I should say 11% or more, have these 7 Phobies, it's very likely that, first of all, most people have them, right? And I mean, I can say that to myself. I have 4 out of 7, so that makes sense. Compared to like Alastor, Chuck, I think very few people have them. As we go down, we sort of see some MVPs that are less reliable, especially the 1-2%. These are much more. They're I think influenced a lot more by personal preference and not necessarily like actual rational usefulness. And now we get all the 0%, right? 0% they were never chosen. First of all, I think 1 or 2 key Phobies are very unlikely to become MVPs, and that's just because, I mean, they don't do enough damage, they don't take enough damage, they're not gonna get to the heart as much, maybe. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell. These I think we can see that these 2 cost Phobies here, like Gesundheit, K9000, also Creep here, a lot of these 2 cost Phobies can be, or Unicorn, which is like 3%, kind of surprising. We can see that these are probably like pretty good, right? We cannot say that these ones are bad. They're just not chosen. They just don't get to the MVPs as much, I think. And obviously the 1 costs, there's no 1 costs in the top MVPs. So I mean, it's hard to rank them if none of them are in the MVPs, right? Then we have, I think, other exemptions of what we could call bad Phobies, which are Phobies with special abilities that are not going to get counted in if they get in the MVP, I mean, if they use them in the game. They're not going to be counted as like huge attributions. So as I mentioned earlier, we have the healers, right? These 4 ones. I think there's supposed to be like another one. It's probably like in the ones that I don't know. So you can guys tell me in the comments. This unicorn looks like a healer, so it's probably this one, but whatever. And you know, you see the pulls, the pushes, and this freaking dragon here that just freezes out of nowhere. I mean, like, his ability is not gonna count like that much in the MVP, right? Yet it can do a huge thing in the game. Doom, you know, all the trap spotters, all the trap deactivators, this thing, the buffers, the nerfers, the movement, with this guy is probably like a special ability that doesn't get counted. Also put down all the electrical phobies, because I think these phobies are like sort of counters, right? Like they're meant to be used in like precise situation. And this is not something I mentioned, okay? But this is gonna like prioritize lots of generalists, cards that are good in general, over cards that are good in specific situations. So you see the electrical are good when you like, I don't know, you use Evo 3.0. But if no Evo 3.0 is used, these cards are just not going to be used. They're not going to get to MVPs, right? And that's going to be most of the time. Doesn't mean that they're bad. They're just good in very precise situations. Here we have the ultra rares, right? So these ones have not been chosen, and that's probably because most people don't have them. If we had everyone that had every phobie, these would be, I think, maybe a little more likely to become MVPs in the top here. Now, I don't necessarily know if they're good or not. I think people usually think that this dude, the Crow, is good. Grimes is good. Not sure about this, but these ones I also just don't know them, and they were not chosen. I mean, I think that if I don't know these phobies, a lot of people are not gonna know them. I mean, I know like this one's like Funky Chicken or something, but I've never played against them, so I think they're just people that don't have them, right? Maybe they're ultra rare, maybe they're not, and they're just new. I don't know. And the two new characters that I mentioned earlier would probably fit in there. And now we have the tier that I said confirmed bad, and I don't like to call it that way because there's a lot of hobbies in here that I think are not bad at all, like Spud and Baby Snaky. I mean, there's an argument that these don't have any special abilities that would mean that, like, let's say if the top 100 players had them and played them, they would be more likely to be like become MVPs than the characters that I mentioned here that have a special ability, because they would be used in game to do damage, to receive damage, all that simple stuff that does get counted into the MVP score. Now, yeah, you can argue that these characters are underrated, right? And that people don't use them enough. I think that's probably an argument for some of them, like Primate, Spud, Baby Sneaky. I mean, I just say that because I've played against them and I think they're good, and I played with them and I think they're good, but I'm just a noob, right? With this tier list, you get the opinion of every single player in the top 100 leaderboard in async, right? Kind of. So I think that's cool. But whatever, I mean, tell me in the comments what you think we can do with these phobies here that don't have a special ability. I mean, this one sort of does, but I don't think it... some of their abilities here are like... how could I say this? They're used to only do damage. So they don't give... They're not support units, or, you know what I mean. Yeah. Okay, so second image here. From our population earlier, we see the same thing we saw in the graph. You know, this one just represented in a better way. Obviously, I did the same separation here, and there's a lot more characters here in confirmed bad, because all the 1% and 2%, all these phobies here, the 1, 2, 3%, they're not gonna be in this sample size, right? A smaller sample size means that there's not as many like rare like 1% phobies, you know. Alright, well, thanks for watching. I hope I could start a discussion with this. I mean, it took a while to do. It was kind of fun, and honestly I don't think I'm done necessarily just analyzing some of this data. If you have any idea of things I could do with this, things I could conclude, I'd like to hear you guys in the comments. Leave some suggestions, and I may do a part 2, you know, just with some of this stuff that I've gotten. If you disagree with the stuff I've said, I mean, I'm no expert in statistics. I've learned a little bit about it, so that's pretty much it. But yeah, I mean, like, if you think that there's things that I did that are not necessarily like scientific, I'd love to know. I think I've rebelled on enough. thanks for watching. See you in the next video, and peace.